Annual virtual conference. Thank you, Nadya, for starting the conference. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to day one of our 2023 virtual conference. We're very, very excited to be starting today off with all of you. We have a really great weekend packed with amazing speakers, amazing conversations about Palestine, and we're very excited that you have decided to register and spend this time with us and for us to have these conversations with you. As many of you know, there's been a lot going on in Palestine. This has been one of the hardest years that we've seen the last year and this year, and we're only in March. But we've also seen a lot of really inspiring resistance, and we're seeing a lot of conversations on the ground. And so we, as members of the diaspora and as a community in the diaspora, really see it as our role to bring those conversations here, to uplift Palestinian voices and to share in the conversations together. So I'm very excited. Again, on behalf of everyone at PACC, welcome to PACC's 4th annual virtual conference. Before I officially get us started, I do want to, for today, we have 2 sessions. We're going to start off with some amazing opening remarks to just give us a reminder of the theme and the importance of this year's theme. And then we will be unpacking the film Farha in honor of the 75th anniversary of the Nakba. Hopefully all of you have watched it and are ready for a really great conversation about it. I do want to come back to this one. I do want to give a very big shout out and thank you to one of our PACC sponsor, Ratib Rabai, with the Holy Land Christian Eusynemical Foundation. We really appreciate your support and we appreciate you sponsoring our conference. And now, without further ado, I'm going to happily pass the mic over to PACC's Executive Director, Rania Mustafa, to get us started for today.
Thank you so much, Abir. Ahlan wa sahlan. Hello and welcome, everybody. It is my utmost pleasure and honor to be welcoming every single one of you from wherever you're tuning in to our 4th annual conference. We have a very, very amazing lineup and a great conference prepared for you. And we're really excited. So just to remind everybody, our theme this year is centering Palestinian narratives, people, and visions. And this really came from the idea that the last 2 years, especially the last year since the Unity Intifada, we have seen a beautiful and motivating surge of Palestinian education and information circulating social media platforms and media news outlets. But what we always want to remember is to center the Palestinian voices and center the realities that are happening on the ground. So at PACC, it is very important for us to make sure that we have access to people on the ground, make sure that we're elevating and uplifting their stories. And that's where this conference came from you. We're bringing a lot of very powerful voices from on the ground to share their experiences, to share their thoughts, and so that we can work together towards unity and liberation for all. So just as a reminder, our conference starts tonight. It'll be going on until 8:30. We're also here tomorrow from 11 to 2 and Sunday from 11 to 2. Before we formally get started, I just want to do a couple of very, very, very big thank yous, and I want everybody to do the what is it called, the applause feature on the reactions. So first off, I want to thank Abir, who's our Palestine Education Director. She's been working tirelessly to make sure that this conference is amazing, and it is going to be, and you all are going to very much enjoy it. I also want to thank Fadia, our marketing and design strategist, who for all her designs, from the PowerPoint to your program booklet to everything you've been seeing on social media. And she's been doing very strong marketing pushes along with our marketing team. I also want to thank our PACC staff. Every single one of them has put in something to make sure that this conference is a success. I want to thank our board of directors for always supporting and encouraging all the work that we do. I want to thank all of the speakers who are dedicating their time to share with you their knowledge about Palestine and to share in solidarity and to work together towards a free Palestine. I also want to thank our moderators who, for the most part, are actually students that are taking different roles in the SJPs, and we're very proud of our young leaders. I want to thank our tech moderators who are behind the scenes, our translators, because as a reminder, we're going to have 2 sessions in Arabic. Ahid and Mona will both be speaking in Arabic, and we'll have translation on the side. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for spending your time learning and educating yourselves about Palestine and committing yourselves towards the Palestinian struggle and towards liberation of all oppressed people. So just a couple of reminders. We have the program booklet and the WhatsApp group, make sure that you have access to both of them. There's going to be links in the chat, so make sure you join our WhatsApp group. Make sure you have access to our program booklet, which will outline all of the Zoom meetings for the weekend and all of the different things that are coming up. It's not too late to register, so if you know anyone who's interested in registering, please ask them to register. We just kindly ask that you do not share the program booklet or the Zoom links with anybody unless they're registered. And if they're registered, they should be getting an email. And if they're not getting an email, just let us know and we'll make sure that they get that. So for some funner rules, so I'm a firm believer that we have to come into these spaces, even though they're virtual, with full intentionality. So we've put together some rules and we would like you all to kind of try your best to abide by them. The first is being as present as possible. I know that we're on Zoom and I know it's very easy to get distracted and try to do other work or, be distracted by your phone. Try to put your phone away for a little bit. Try to really be present. If you can turn on your cameras, we'd love to see you. We want to build community. If you have something you want to say, when the time's right, feel free to share either through the chat or raise hand feature. We really want you to be as present as possible. We also ask that you be ready to learn. We're having a lot of different speakers here, a lot of different experiences being shared, and we want everybody to walk in here and walk away from this weekend with, the best experience possible and hopefully having learned something. The next rule is ask questions. So we want you to be as interactive as possible. The chat features here, we may not be able to have everyone verbally share just because we have a lot of participants in many different sessions, but we want you to ask your questions. So please put them in the chat. We're going to try our best to get to all the questions. If we can't get to them, we'll try our best to reach out to our speakers to see if there's a way that we can get to them. And lastly, build community. I know that this is a virtual space, but PACC, the cornerstone of PACC is community. And so we actually, every year, we keep our WhatsApp group active past the conference. And it is a way to keep you tied to this community that we're building. So really make it a point. You maybe, direct message a couple people, get to know people, and hopefully this will continue fostering this sense of communityship. Lastly, before I get started, I want to thank Jinan Matari. She is donating on behalf of her company, Zaytoon Publicity. She is donating $1,000 and beginning a Zaytoon PACC Journalism Scholarship. We are actually launching it tonight, so this is the first time anybody hears about it. We're very, very excited to be launching it. This is open to anybody who's of Palestinian descent that's interested in journalism or storytelling. It's up to $1,000 and we will hopefully be doing this annually. So please, we're going to be making some announcements every day, but make sure that you take a chance to check out this scholarship. And if you know anyone who's in journalism or storytelling, make sure to spread the word. So now with all the housekeeping done, I'd like to get started, and I have the honor and privilege of introducing Nadya Tannous, who has been a longtime PACC supporter and is doing such amazing work across the country. Nadya Tannous will start us off with some opening remarks and reflections about the importance of the theme of the conference and what you can expect from the conference today and this weekend. Nadya is a passionate community organizer, born and raised in the Bay Area, in the Ohlone territory, with a focus on political education, movement relationship building, and returning land to the people and people returning to the land. Nadya is a member of the Palestinian Youth Movement, which is an amazing organization that I encourage all of you to check out. She currently serves as the Director of Operations for Honor the Earth. Nadya holds an MSc in Forced Migration and Refugee Studies from the University of Oxford and a BA in Anthropology and Sociology from UC Santa Cruz. So without further ado, Nadya, the mic is yours.
Hello, Rania, Nabir. Firstly, just thank you so much for having me. This is an incredible feat. I'm so excited for this conference. If it's not clear already, I'm going to verify what Rania just said. I am a longtime supporter of PACC, and I really, really appreciate the perspectives and the programming and also the interventions that you all offer for us. I think really encouraging us to be brave and courageous and to connect within our own communities and with other communities where we are in our cities. I think you're a wonderful example, and it's just, yeah, I can't say enough. But I also want to say thank you all for joining us tonight. It's an honor to be able to kick off this year's conference. Again, my name is Nadya Tannous, and I'm a member of the Palestinian Youth Movement, which is a popular, independent, and transnational, meaning cross-border movement, working towards the full liberation of Palestine, of our land, and of our people from Zionism. And thinking about this conference, I wanted to first reflect on the conference that PACC put together this time last year on sharing intergenerational knowledge, and what it means to have this event and the theme of this year's conference as centering Palestinian narratives, people, and visions. And I really would like to reflect on what is taking place on the ground in Palestine, in our refugee camps, in our different cities and villages, and our collective position and experiences as Palestinians. When I think of centering us, I think of centering our collective experience. And as Rania Nabir mentioned, as all of us I know are aware, these are really trying times for us, for our struggle here, and also for our people in Palestine, and really on the front lines of asking that question, what is the price of freedom? And I think, funny enough, when I saw the link in the chat around Nakba survivors, when I was thinking about this and moving forward into what's some of the most prominent things that come to our mind when we think of what we collectively experience as Palestinians, no matter where we are, it's the fact that our Nakba generation is preparing to leave us. Those who experienced the Nakba as teenagers or adults are nearing the ends of their lives. My grandparents left us a very long time ago. I know that this loss is something that is both impending and also existential. What will it mean to carry on the struggle for Palestine, being unable to maybe offer justice for the first generation who was displaced and who really fought back and did so much courageous work in terms of collecting and centralizing their narratives to give us a foundation in order to struggle for Palestinian political rights, our human rights, and our cultural rights. So I want to start there. I think also, we should be realistic in thinking about what this moment brings us for Palestine, and in terms of our narrative. We're reaching our 75th anniversary of Nakba, and our stories and our history have finally reached and recently breached the consciousness of the global North, meaning the so-called United States, so-called Canada, Australia, Britain, the ones who continue to support and perpetuate our oppression. Let's be clear, they're about 50 years behind our comrades in the global South, right, who have recognized the situation of Palestinian subjectification under Zionism, and who have risen to support us across the board. Of course, every nation is different. But we should know that we know from the Unity Intifada, our stories and our narrative, our voices, what this conference is about. They've breached something. They've breached a consciousness of the popular demographic, and particularly youth. And so when we think about the leadership of youth, both, as you all said, and being a big part of PACC, we also see youth on the front lines of our struggle back home. We see youth on the front lines of our struggle on our campuses. We see youth historically on the front lines of our struggle, pushing our liberation movement and nationally and internationally forward. I think in contrasting the Nakba generation being prepared to leave us, we also look to the young people, like those who are on the front lines of the Lion's Den, or those who are on the front lines of the work in confronting annexation in Jerusalem, or in confronting the mass and increasing incarceration of our people on the ground. And we also think of not just the old dying, but the young dying. I want to name that we're almost, done with March, but we're nearing almost 100 martyrs in Palestine. And yesterday alone, we lost Youssef Shrem, who's 29 years old from Jenin, Lo'ay al-Zaghir, 37 years old from Jenin, Omar Awadin, 16 years old from Jenin, and Nidal Khazem, 28 years old from Jenin. And we lost 2 more from Nablus. And I think one of the things that we're often asked is, what does our struggle embody? And I think Abir said this to me early on, do we as Palestinians embody resistance and solidarity? I'd say, I hope so. But if we're speaking of the sacrifices that we've chosen to make in this moment, then I would say the assessment is correct, because nobody can deny that with the delayed but recognizable increase of understanding of Palestinians fighting against a colonial oppressor, we also have increased the price that we are paying with our lives and our freedom of movement, our freedom to be in our homelands, our freedom and our right to return. And so just to start there, so that we can be together and think about the collective assessment. So moving forward, when asked what it means to center Palestinians, our narratives, our visions, and our collective, I first come to the question, of course, of the mounting repression. What is the price of freedom? And what does it mean to maintain Palestinians at the center of our struggle? And I think that's the right question. So first we can say, okay, who gets to speak for Palestine? What do we get a say in? And I think this question, again, is most powerful when we think of the central demands of our struggle. So what are they, right? They're the right of return, the rights of refugees, the liberation of the land, freedom for all of our prisoners. And these demands can't be bartered, they can't be sold. So if a Palestinian comes tomorrow and says, guess what? I'll give up the right of return in order for my family to come back. We know that that's contrary to the collective demands of our rights as the Palestinian people. We've made those central agreements, right? When we think of who gets to speak for Palestine and Palestinians, maybe we say, externally. So if we speak about our siblings in struggle, or we speak to our allies who are advocating for Palestine, what does solidarity at its core mean? It means that if I'm next to you, you advocate for Palestinian political, human, and cultural rights. And if it means that if I'm not next to you, you advocate for Palestinian political, human, and cultural rights, right? So it means that I don't have to be there. We as Palestinians don't have to be there for our allies and for our siblings in struggle to bring our cause forward. And again, to do that by rooting it in the central demands that we have a people as a shab have agreed and identified upon, right? When we think of, again, turning that question inwards, like, who gets to speak for Palestine? That's for us. We can't answer that question easily. We have to think about fragmentation. And we have to think about the fragmentation of the Oslo moment, the post-Oslo moment that we're living in. Oslo, politically, geographically, economically, and spiritually fragmented us as a Palestinian people. Oslo tried to define, who is in Palestine and who's out, who's really Palestinian and who's not, right? As an attempt to really break up our collective voice and our claim to our struggle. And I think, not only do we reject this fervently, and not only should we be really aware of these dynamics, but we also acknowledge that, we see remnants of this fragmentation everywhere. And it's part of why those of us who live in the 48 territories, in Gaza and Lebanon, have different experiences in those places or different material conditions, because we're geographically and politically isolated from each other. We have been. Now, the Unity Intifada was a choice. It was a choice to say, we as Palestinians are experiencing different things. We're facing different aspects of a colonial repression, a bureaucratic colonialism where people who look like us, talk like us, might be related to us, are managing our oppression for, the state of Israel, which is not unique to us. We have bureaucratic colonial governments everywhere in the world, right? It's just a stage. And I think, we have this fragmentation in our mindsets, but Unity Intifada was saying, no, we're going to refute this post-Oslo moment because we know that we have a united demands. We have the responsibility to each other. It means that when something happens to us in Gaza, the West Bank responds. It means that when something happens in Jerusalem, 48 responds, right? It means that if you take one of our fingers, the other one in Lebanon responds. People in Jordan respond, right? They march to the border. So being able to fulfill that, the collective resistance, the collective solidarity amongst ourselves, that has been a key in actually winning and pushing back against Zionism. That's what Unity Intifada meant to me. And I think that's what this moment means. And what's exciting about that, again, is that it's the youth who are leading it, which means that this new cycle and this new iteration of struggle, inshallah, has a very long life ahead of it, right? Nobody knows the way out of settler colonialism. None of us know. So why not use this time to experiment by utilizing and trying the gamut of resistance that's available to us in order to push that forward? It's a question of survival, but it's also a question of not just imagining what a free Palestine will look like, but imagining the road to get there. And that's part of being organizers. That's part of putting our movements in the streets into institutions like PACC and rebuilding the institutions that were fragmented or destroyed in that post-Oslo moment, as we were, right? And so I think that's really a call to us, even if we have disagreements, or especially if we have disagreements as Palestinians, to be able to come together and practice what we have always practiced in this time in order to be resilient, in order to succeed in pushing back against Zionism and the silence of the global North. We say, okay, for example, we talk about the apartheid framework, right? We know that apartheid is one layer of our struggle. Does apartheid exist in Palestine? Absolutely. Yes, we have two separate legal entities and systems for two groups of people. But apartheid is partly prescriptive. If, for me, I have family who are in 48, they live in Ajami neighborhood, which is our village of Yafa. Many of them remain there today. If they have equal rights to their Jewish Israeli counterparts in 48, is that justice for Palestinian people? Is that justice for them? For me, it is not. Why? Because it doesn't address the root cause of displacement, dispossession, subjugation, and oppression. It doesn't meet our political demands of the right of return. And similarly, if Palestinians in Gaza tomorrow had clean water, were able to move, freedom of movement, that would be a big deal. I would never minimize what that would do for our people who are suffering some of the worst material conditions of the Palestinian people. But that's their human rights. Are they truly free if they don't have the right of return? They don't have the right to go back to their villages. No. So you can't have one or the other. We have to have the whole thing. And I think that's why apartheid, again, it's a big deal that we're able to actually push this framework forward as a strategy to say, okay, now Harvard Review, right? Harvard News and the law school have picked up apartheid, right? Have stated it this year. Israel is an apartheid state. Amnesty International, OCHR, big bodies that have finally recognized it. Again, 75 years of us living it, but they arrived to the party this year. So we can't minimize that there's power in that. What I'm saying is, where's our forum to be able to discuss what justice looks like if I'm saying, yes, it's a big deal and there's a shortcoming? Because I'm interested in justice for all of our people to the root, not just being equal to our oppressors, but having justice as Palestinian people who are the victims of a historic and ongoing crime, and who have the right to self-determination, who have the ability and the duty and the responsibility to fulfill the central demands that we have already agreed on, that our Nakba generation who are leaving us agreed upon and gave their lives for, many of them, that our youth who are in prison today, many of our people of the lost generation in their 40s and their 50s, right? They were silenced by this. And it's a central demand to say, we deserving of the right of return. We will never forfeit the rights of refugees. We will never forfeit the liberation and totality of our land and our people, right? Because that is central to our dignity. And so that's what I mean in terms of being able to push ourselves in order to envision not just a free Palestine, but the road to getting there. And sometimes that means that we also have to talk about things that are a little bit, maybe hard to speak about, especially in the face of ongoing criminalization and repression. And the piece I'm speaking about is resistance. I think we need to acknowledge that resistance is a gamut. Cultural resistance is real. What Ghassan Kanafani did, what he contributed in his life, in terms of taking and culminating the narratives of our grandparents or of his parents' generation in order to turn the story of dispossession in Yafa to a collective net, a collective memory, something that we could come back to, especially as generations who may never have seen Palestine or who have been born away from it. Having that as a roadmap back, that is courageous, that is resistance, because it pushes back against the narrative of Zion and the powers of Zionism that attempt to eradicate our narrative and to erase us physically from the land. We also have to talk about boycott as a tactic. I think one thing that's exciting for me is that we're moving from just consumer based awareness boycotts, which I was very much a part of when I was a student, saying this company is bad, right? You don't want to purchase their stuff, or you want to divest from this company because of their engagement with human rights abuses. Really important. We've tried it, it's worked. But a leveling up that I see now in BDS campaigns is that organizers are actually going to the people who stock the store. So not going just for the consumers in awareness, but saying to those who maybe have the contract for distribution, you should not be distributing Sadaf. You should not be distributing Sabra Hummus, right? You should not be distributing Strauss, right? And actually in the DSA BDS working group, they have this incredible toolkit, and I was shocked. I learned things. I had no idea that Strauss, right, the milk company, actually funded the Haganah. They were part of the original funding apparatus for the Haganah. I had no idea, right? Being able to deepen our understanding of the ways that these different vestiges actually have played a critical part and built wealth upon our oppression really helps us think about BDS as a tactic, which is very Palestinian, right? Since 1936 with the Arab Revolt, the Intifadas, right? This is tried and true. but it helps us think also about, okay, how do we get to the next level of creating apartheid-free zones? Not just taking one thing off the shelf, but being able to create a standard that we're asking our allies and those who are in small businesses, often our communities who are merchants, right? Often to be able to say, okay, we're going to take this level, we're going to take this standard. And for those of us we know stratified across different levels of class and employment or etc., being able to say, this is actually your role. So if we want this to be a popular struggle, what does it mean to center Palestinians and our narratives, our people, our vision? It means for us to establish a role for all of us to engage in, right? To take up that struggle in seriousness. And also for our allies, for our supporters, again, to be able to do that, holding our central demands instead of bartering them or diminishing them. Again, for boycott, just thinking about how, a conversation that we are far from approaching, but let's bookmark it for later, is reparations. What does it mean for these corporations and for the beneficiaries, those young people who perhaps are inheriting the money of their grandparents who are in the Strauss company, etc., or APAC, the founders of APAC, who perhaps, unlike their grandparents, are anti-Zionist? What does it mean for them to play a role in our struggle? What does it mean for them to play a role in undoing the violence that Israel is part of undoing the violence that their grandparents were part of enacting on behalf of the Israeli state. Another piece of resistance, and perhaps the last one, is obviously the tactics that Palestinian groups are using on the ground under political pluralism, and with the choice of saying, we have decided to pay the ultimate price, which is staying, right? The ultimate price isn't death. The ultimate price is an imprisonment. It's the choice, instead of leaving, to confront it. And we know that many, many of our people have not had the choice to leave, but we also know that our people have decided to stay, even in the seam zones where they might be the last piece or the last buffer between the uniting of settlements. Or they might be some of the last families, for example, in Al-Quds, in the areas encroaching on Beit Hanina, right? To be able to risk the oppression that comes for the entire family unit, collective grief, collective sacrifice, which of course includes death, the risk of death, incarceration, removal, and impoverishment. What does it mean for us to pay attention to the sacrifices that our people are making on the ground, and to say we have an active role in that too? It's not the same role, but it's an active one. And that's something that we often say in the Palestinian youth movement to youth who are coming in, is that it is that Oslo fragmentation that have told, has left residue for us, right? And our perspectives and our souls, just to say, I want to speak about Palestine. I want to advocate for the Palestinian struggle, but I don't feel like I'm Palestinian enough to do that. Or I'm worried. I'm worried because of the repression that I'm experiencing on my campus, right? And how that might impact my ability to be hired, how that might impact my ability to go home, how that might connect to repression of my family on the ground, right? And rightly so. I think it's easier to navigate repression from a place of power rather than paranoia, when again, we put ourselves as Palestinians into the collective context of what sacrifices our people make every day. And asking that question of how do we keep each other safe? How do we make a good assessment of risk? And how do we also understand that we are asked to sacrifice as part of taking an active role in our struggle? And there are ways to do that that are strategic, autonomous, and proactive. I think the other piece is thinking about, again, the incarceration of our people back home, and trying to remember also where our power lies for those of us who are living in the diaspora. So to scale it back one more piece, for those of us in the diaspora and for the youth often who come, and some people who are older as well, right, to say we are not Palestinian enough to pick up our struggle, that again is a reflection of Oslo. Who is in and who is out? That's literally the fragmentation that we see on the ground playing out in our minds. I would never say that my experiences are the same as my family members, even people who are related to me by one generation, right? But I'm just as Palestinian as they are. And if I don't pick up our liberation struggle, the liberation struggle doesn't exist. If people like me don't pick it up, people like us don't pick it up, then it doesn't exist. Why? Because over 50% of our people don't live in our homeland. Again, not by choice. So what is our role, right? For when something happens on the ground, right? Those families, the people who are paying the ultimate sacrifice by staying, by confronting, by being present on the land, by making those decisions, right? To be courageous. What is our role in the diaspora? Well, we have a lot of them to play, but I think it's up to us to think about that. How do we help rebuild the economic infrastructure of our people back home so that they can subsist against occupation? What does it mean for us to take up seriously rebuilding the ecological and agricultural sector of our people in the West Bank so they can feed themselves, so that they can use their water in order to create jobs and food and survive in an ecosystem? If the goal is to stay on the land, how do we support them, right? We have that role. We often think of that as a Zionist role because they have been the ones historically and presently to utilize some of those 501c3 systems, and they don't have to confront some of the big, scary lawfare accusations that come at Palestinians who try to support our communities back home, like the Holy Land Five, right? And we know that the repression is chilling. We know the post 9/11 moment very well, and the war on terror moment very well. We exist in it every day. But being able to, again, come together to collectively vision what it means to really impact the conditions of our people back home, there are so many things, so many brilliant ideas we would come up with. And guess what? That question I just asked, there are Palestinian collectives who are already taking that up on the ground in Palestine. There are 4 new cooperative models that were just developed over the past 6 months who are taking up this question. How do we support them? What does that look like? What can our role be for Palestinians, for us, in order to really support our people back home? Meaning that when the West Bank, when people in the West Bank or in Jenin, explicitly, right, the martyrs that I read their names at the beginning, when they're hit, how do we respond? We have a gamut of responses available to us. How do we make sure that the suffering that's happening, the sacrifices that are being paid, don't happen in a silo? Part of that is protest, to be clear. Part of that has been us coming out into the streets in order to say, when this happens back home, we show up and we call to attention inside of one of the countries that is most guilty for supporting the occupation and repression of our people, right? Just like when people hear from our communities or from other communities in struggle are attacked by police, what do? We rise up and we demand justice through the system. We demand an inquiry and we demand justice outside of the system. There are multiple strategies that are both principle, value-based, right? But if we don't talk about them, if we don't get together to envision them, then what does that mean for our collective struggle? So in asking the question of the theme of this conference, again, I think of what it means for us to tackle these things collectively with a foundation that we've agreed upon, and to not be scared to build out solutions, experiments, trial and error in order for us to work on the path to freedom. It is the least that we can do when our people are paying the ultimate sacrifice on the front lines of our struggle. I know that I am nearing the end of my time coming soon. I wanted to also reflect on the conference itself. So what are we here for this weekend? Well, we have actually a very broad range of Palestinian voices and people, organizers, who are bringing their solutions and their experiences to us. Those of us who are Palestinian, who are Arab, who are Muslim, and who are Christian, and who are allies of this struggle, people who care. Those of you who, when we're not there, speak up for our political, human, and cultural rights. And so when I look at this lineup, I think of Muna el-Kurd and how much we can learn from listening to her, from her experiences on the front line in Sheikh Jarrah, or perhaps on what it means to fully learn from the lessons of South Africa, from the delegation that she attended with the Palestinian Youth Movement in 2018 to South Africa, right? We use the apartheid framework. What does it mean to really learn from the South African experience, knowing where they're at now, right? Where there is still economic divisions and inequity, mass inequity based on those same racial lines. So where does that leave us, for example? I think of Ahed Tamimi, who herself is a student and is organizing in the university, and who has also been imprisoned for confronting Zionism literally on her front door, who has received, knowledge, teachings, part of that intergenerational knowledge and resilience from Palestinians inside of prisons. What can she teach us from her perspective, rising from a young person, a child on the scene, to now a young woman who is part of her own collective groups in the university, and also is seeking, a pathway forward that ranges from human rights law to who knows. We'll have to hear from her. I'm really excited to learn from her. And I think Nada Elia, talking about Farha, the film. Nada is somebody who continues to teach me, and I think teaches us, about the possibility of understanding Palestine through different justice frames. I am excited to hear her perspective and to be with you all in this discussion, to learn from her. And I think Nada is somebody who can bring a lot of examples, history, and information, new analysis that really pushes us on the boundaries of what we bring into Palestine. So when we think about Palestinian justice, it pushes us on the boundaries, again, of what is possible, and helps shine lights into the corners of analyses that we haven't even looked at yet. I think that will be really important looking at the Farha film, and particularly thinking about the question of narrative. And I hope she talks about her new book. Next, we have Omar Barghouti, who likewise, as the rest, does not need an introduction. I think hearing from him on his experience now organizing out of the BNC, and perhaps reflecting too on the status of BDS, Where are we seeing some of these front lines also in the student movement on campuses and around consumer boycotts? I think he has so much to say, and I always enjoy his perspective on internationalism, which we've spoken about many times, right? But we're lucky to have as an endemic character and a choice of our struggle. And lastly, the right to education, which, really looking at the student front and understanding why Zionism confronts our students as an intentional layer of oppression, both here and in Palestine. Why? That's where the power is. That's one of our main power sources, is our students, and is our right to education. So I'm excited to learn from them. I think Rania and Nabir, you've done an excellent job of putting together a diversity of experiences, a diversity of perspectives. I think if you put Mona, Ahed, Nada, Omar, the folks from Right to Education and myself in a room, we disagree on a lot of things altogether. But also as Palestinians, we would agree not just on the central demands, but I think we would also agree on a pluralistic approach to trying out a different way out of settler colonialism, to trying different ways to confront Zionism, to trying different ways of taking our movements from the streets and trying to place them into institutions, or taking up our institutions and asking, what is the role for them to support those of us who are in the streets, those of us who are in the jail, and those of us who are grieving family members who have been taken and have paid that ultimate price by choosing to stay. I also want to say that clearly, and I'm saying this to you as someone who is born in diaspora, who's been raised in diaspora, and I think to many of us who are now in diaspora if we haven't been born here, do not underestimate the contribution that you have to our struggle. And do not forfeit the responsibility that you have to learn about our people in all of the different ways that we are. Also, the benefit of being in a collective is that you don't have to know everything, because Rania knows it. The stuff you don't know, Rania knows that. The stuff that I don't know, Raghida knows that. The stuff that Abir doesn't know, Muna knows that. And so being able to take up not just fragmentation and the splitting up of our parts, but again, living in this scope in this new era, inshallah, of the unity and Intifada, in order to make a mosaic of the different pieces of who we are. And through that, to be able to create a bastion that will confront Zionism and will take our methods and our people to freedom, inshallah, for every single one of us, for everybody, from the river to the sea, from the camps to San Francisco, from New Jersey to Gaza, inshallah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy and excited to see what this weekend holds, and excited to be in community with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadya. I don't know why you got me emotional for that second. And I hope we are able to see, the wishes that you said in the end as a reality. And I think that's why I was overcome by emotion. And I really want to emphasize, Nadya, that was a beautiful start to our conference, and it's going to be a great reflection of all the different conversations we're going to be having over this weekend. And I want to emphasize one point specifically, which is take ownership of the struggle. And I know at PACC, we always have that. Like, I was born here, I didn't really know, I just recently reconnected with my identity. Doesn't matter, you're Palestinian, you stand with Palestine, take ownership, right? And that's really the key. And I want that message like plastered in everybody's minds. So thank you, Nadya. That was such a beautiful start to the conference. We're very excited for our next session. I'm going to pass the mic back to Abir. Before I do, I just want to kindly ask for everybody to please make sure you write your full names in your name box, just because we're going through check-in and some names don't add up with what we have. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Nadya, for such a powerful start. And with that, I pass the mic to Abir.
Thank you, Rania. And again, echoing, thank you.